So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Linda Conway. I'm the Executive Director for NENPA, and welcome to the New England Newspaper Convention. We're doing things a little differently this year by offering both virtual and in-person training, Monday through Thursday with the in-person training, and on Saturday we'll have Monday through Thursday with the virtual training, and then on Saturday we'll have the in-person training. So welcome to the second session for 2023, AI in the Newsroom. Just to let you know, you can place any of your questions in the chat box or raise your hand, and I will be monitoring it and we'll let Rob know. But a little bit about this session. So as more businesses begin experimenting with ChatGPT, there's been a lot of discussion about how, and more importantly, if it should be used in journalism. So today we have two people who've been keeping a close eye on AI, and they're going to discuss this issue with us. So please ask questions. The workshops are always best when there's a lot of participation. So our second presenter, David Karpf, is going to be joining us in about 30 minutes. But right now I want to introduce you to Rob Bertsche. Most of you know Rob already. He's a First Amendment and media litigator and counselor, and he holds up Klaris Law's Boston location. Rob's a former journalist, and he has a national reputation representing print and online newspapers, magazines, broadcasters, documentary filmmakers, websites. He's known by practically everybody in the New England newspaper industry. He is the longtime general counsel for New England Newspaper and Press Association. He also serves on the board of the New England First Amendment Coalition and as a member of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court's Judiciary Media Committee. For the Media Law Resource Center, he writes the annual outlines of First Circuit media libel and Massachusetts employment libel law. And since 2005, he's been selected by the American Society of Magazine Editors to conduct annual legal training programs in the editorial and business aspects of print and online publications. Rob is kind enough to offer workshops and sessions for NENPA every year. His sessions are always some of the most well-attended that we have. For the past 15 years, he's regularly been rated a best lawyer and super lawyer in the fields of media law and First Amendment litigation.
I don't want to cut into our time.
All right, I'll stop. Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you.
If people want copies of the slides, should I ask them to email me, or how can they get them?
They could email either one of us, but we're also going to have a recording of this available to anybody who's registered for the convention. But yeah, if people want copies of the slides, either email me or Rob.
Okay, you will see my email address in big letters on this first page, and don't hesitate to email me for a copy of the slides. You'll see we have a number of links in here. There are a lot of people doing some terrific work in this area, and I'll be able to only scratch the surface in the 70 minutes that we have in front of us. I'm aware of the anachronism of saying artificial intelligence in the newsroom when we don't really have newsrooms anymore. Everybody's working from home, and I would recommend to you Maureen Dowd's column in yesterday's New York Times, Requiem for the Newsroom. But maybe that makes our topic a little more important because there's a different kind of atmosphere and a different kind of camaraderie and cooperative work that takes place that makes the level of trust that much more important. So Bill Gates says AI is as revolutionary as mobile phones and the internet. Well, that may be so, but the Future of Life Institute says they can pose profound risks to society and humanity. That advanced AI could represent a profound change in the history of life on Earth and should be planned for and managed with commensurate care and resources. And unfortunately, this level of planning and management is not happening, even though recent months have seen AI labs locked in an out-of-control race to develop and deploy ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. The Future of Life Institute backed with 27,565 people signing this petition, says we've created a Frankenstein. We don't know what to do with it. They say, should we let machines flood our information channels with propaganda and untruth? Should we risk loss of control of our civilization? Such decisions must not be delegated to unelected tech leaders. Powerful AI systems should be developed only after we're confident that their effects will be positive and their risks will be manageable. And therefore, we call on all AI labs to immediately pause for at least 6 months the training of AI systems more powerful than GPT-4. If that can't be enacted quickly, governments should step in and institute a moratorium. So there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of concern on all sides here. And let's see what it's all about and how it plays out. I want to take you now to ChatGPT and ask it for its sense of how worried we ought to be. So, Linda, can everybody see my ChatGPT screen?
Yes, we can see it, Rob.
Right. So ChatGPT, tell me, what can you do? Well, as an AI language model, I have a wide range of capabilities. I can answer questions, generate text, translate, summarize, analyze the sentiment or tone of a piece of text, classify text into different categories based on content, or engage in conversations with users and provide information. Overall, I am a versatile tool. Doesn't seem to think that it is the end of all civilization. Let's ask it now a more specific question. What are the benefits and detriments of using ChatGPT in a newspaper newsroom? Well, there are several benefits and detriments. Benefits are increased efficiency, improved accuracy. We'll see about that one. Access to diverse perspectives. We'll see about that one maybe too. Cost savings. One may ask long-term and short-term. Detriments are a lack of nuance. Bias may reproduce biases or stereotypes that exist in its training data. Loss of jobs. Now you're all paying attention, huh? Ethical concerns. Overall, the benefits and detriments depend on how it's used and integrated into the newsroom's processes. Well, then, Mr. Chat or Ms. Chat GPT, what are the tasks for which Chat GPT is best suited for use in our newsroom? And now we'll get a sense of its tolerance for typos. Seems to deal with my typos okay. Can be used in a variety of tasks in a newsroom, but it's best suited for tasks that involve natural language processing and text generation, such as summarizing news articles, generating news stories, fact-checking, okay, translating news articles, maybe, generating social media posts, and research and data analysis. What are the dangers of using Chat GPT in the newsroom? Don't worry, I'm not going to Chat GPT run our whole session. The dangers: bias and inaccuracy, lack of context, may not be able to capture the full context and nuance of a news story, leading to oversimplification or misrepresentation. Ethical concerns: reduced quality of journalism, job losses, and a lack of transparency. Overall, the dangers depend on how it's used and integrated, blah, blah, blah. And finally, I'm going to ask it a prompt that was suggested to me by one of the many people I've come to know as I prepared for this in the helpful AI community, a woman named Tekla Zamansky, who I'll mention a little bit later. AI, friend or foe, can be both a friend and a foe. I guess that doesn't surprise you much, does it? Can be a friend with increased efficiency, accuracy, medical advances, environmental benefits, but the risks are job displacement, bias, discrimination, privacy concerns, can analyze vast amounts of personal data, and weaponization. It can be used to develop autonomous weapons or other technologies that can be used for malicious purposes. Now, there's a good deal of confusion about how ChatGPT and similar AI large language programs can be used in newsrooms, as we'll see. The public broadcasting station in Kansas City, which calls itself Flatland, which I thought was kind of cute, was gloating about Kansas City's win in the Super Bowl just passed. So they asked ChatGPT to write a news story heralding the victory. And let me take you to what ChatGPT had to say. You'll have to give me a second to find the right tab here. All right. And the question was, they wanted to ask ChatGPT to write a news story heralding the Kansas City Chiefs' recent Super Bowl victory. There we go.
Other humans. Okay, let's try something a little easier and give ChatGPT even more guidance and see if that kind of yields a better result. We won against the Buccaneers. I'm not really sure why it came up with such false information on this, but I think
those of you who are football fans will know that Kansas City Chiefs lost to the Buccaneers in 2021 and won over the Philadelphia Eagles this year. ChatGPT got it just plain wrong, probably because it was training on material that stopped in 2021, and it really doesn't have any common sense. It only looks for what is the most probable thing to come after what came before. In any event, if you weren't there to be the editor and fix that, you'd have some egg on your face if you were at a Kansas City newspaper.
We get the point. ChatGPT is not going to replace the writing, interviewing, and fact-checking of a journalist. But that doesn't mean that ChatGPT and AI can't be helpful in a newsroom. The report shows that most newsrooms felt they would benefit by using AI to complete repetitive, menial tasks because this would allow reporters to spend more time covering and investigating other topics. These tasks ranged from super simple things like entering metadata on photos to more complex things like scanning local agendas and meeting minutes to determine if anything newsworthy happened during those meetings, especially in newsrooms that have very few reporters, few resources, or a large coverage area. To learn more, I reached out to Amy Reinhart, the program manager for the AP's Local News AI initiative.
Academia has lost its mind over this because they're very, very, very concerned about students writing essays written through ChatGPT. I think the second industry that's losing its mind over this is journalism.
So we are one of the industries that's losing its mind over ChatGPT. how do we get our mind back? Well, I think the key is to realize that ChatGPT is really just a tool. And you need to know its capabilities, you need to know its limitations. So let me talk first about some of its capabilities, what it's good for. The video mentions recording metadata, scanning meeting agendas. I'm not so sure I'm going to trust ChatGPT to decide what is important that's snuck into the town council meeting agenda and what's not, but you may differ with me. Here's Amy Reinhardt from the AP again.
It's also important to note that we already use AI in many forms. I use it almost every day for transcription services. We use it to create graphics from data, generating metrics as far as website visitors. Even the autocorrection built into a word processor or into your phone is a form of AI.
Good technology, you don't often realize you're using it. You know, all of those things are predicting what they think you meant. And they're so fluid and part of our lives now. And I do think that will be part of this. Now, if you wanted to use a chatbot like ChatGPT, not for reporting, but maybe you're short on editors, maybe you're a 3-person newsroom, and you want to be able to summarize the article you just wrote, or write a Twitter thread with it, or do A/B headline testing. It could be really helpful with that. Maybe you're the only person covering the beat in your newsroom and you want to bounce some ideas off. And it might not be the story you report on, but it gets you thinking. So in some ways, in the absence of colleagues, it could fill that gap. But again, there's always that human in the loop. It's you who's discerning, yes, I'll use that, or no, I won't, or hey, that thing makes me think about another thing that is related, and now I'm going to go do that. So I do think it can be a good assistant and useful in that way. And for local newsrooms who maybe don't have a marketing department, they do now.
David, thank you so much for joining us. David Karpf is how do you say your last name, David? Karpf?
Karpf, the F is silent, actually.
Okay, David Karpf. David's an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. And he's taught there since joining the department as an assistant professor in 2012. He previously spent 2 years as an assistant professor at Rutgers University School of Communication and Information. His research explores the internet's impact on political associations, both in the formation of novel organization structures seen in Move On and Daily Kos, and also tracing implications for more traditional advocacy organizations. His first book, The Move On Effect, The Unexpected Transformation of American Political Advocacy, was published in May of 2012. His second book, Analytic Activism, Digital Listening and the New Political Strategy, was published in December 2016. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Could you talk to the audience and give them a sense of, is this the new messiah for local news?
So I would encourage local news organizations to move slowly with generative AI. I think these tools can be time savers, but we're in a moment of extreme enthusiasm, both utopian enthusiasm and dystopian enthusiasm. So that letter you just put up there, that's from a set of people who are saying, you know, this is going to be the end of the world. I am very skeptical that it's going to be the end of the world. It could be a new problem for journalism, but a new set of problems for journalism. But the biggest problem I think it's likely to pose is in the same way that if we think back to 2007 or so, when we had the first wave of what has now been an ongoing wave of journalism crises. And the crisis of journalism in 2007, if everybody can remember that far back, it wasn't caused by the political blogosphere or by bloggers competing with journalists. It's actually driven first by Craigslist and then by Google and later Facebook. Facebook not so much in 2007. Because what the real threat to journalism wasn't competition from writing, it was competition over advertisements, right? So if we look back to how you fund a newspaper, like a local newspaper in the 1990s, a lot of it was that a local newspaper was the only place to do classified ads. There's a lot of money in the classified page. Craigslist undercuts that. right? The rest of the newspaper is largely getting funded by being able to monetize eyeballs twice, by both charging for the paper and then charging advertisers to reach those readers. And that advertising market, the rest of the advertising market, gets undercut by Google. And that leaves us in a situation where, like, I have some friends, colleagues who run, one of my friends runs the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism over at Oxford in the UK. The one thing that they repeatedly find when they study journalism in a comparative perspective is in countries that fund their news business, the newspaper has remained very popular. Newspapers haven't largely gone away in the United States, like local papers haven't gone away because of a lack of demand, but because we can't afford that, we can't pay for them anymore because the funding streams were undercut. So one of the concerns that I have if I was working in the news business right now is, what is ChatGPT going to do over the next few years to your existing revenue streams? And the answer right now is we don't know, but there's probably cause for concern. I have done a bit of writing comparing this to the moment in 2010. There's a company called Demand Media that was sort of the biggest of the content farms. They ran Cracked.com. They ran a number of the other sites that were generating low quality content, both text and video, that was designed to capture value from the Google ad market. Right, so they would identify what are questions that have high value, high revenue advertisements that will go by on the Google sidebar, if you and have low salient search rankings already, and then they would pay a freelancer a couple bucks in order to produce something just to fill that gap, so they could scoop out the Google ad revenue, and that proved tremendously effective. When Demand Media went public, it went public for several billion. It was more valuable than the New York Times. And that looked back in 2010 like the end state of journalism. Like it was all going to turn into this low quality, to be frank, crap, because, you know, the writers are getting paid $1, $5, $10 in order to produce it. That can't be good, but that's where all the money was. That's where everything seemed to be headed. And what saved us from that, what seemed like an inevitable future, is Google eventually stepped in and said, you know what, they've found a hole in our advertising models. This is producing bad results, bad journalism. Our readers don't, our visitors don't like it. And so they changed their algorithm to punish content farms like Demand Media. And that problem kind of went away. They fixed the money and that fixed the problem. What worries me in this current moment is we're seeing things like ChatGPT that can very easily, I mean, you can now do that sort of content farming without even paying a freelancer, right? You can identify, here's a question that's often searched for, ask ChatGPT to generate an article. You can staple together a few other generative AI, because you can do generative AI video pretty cheap right now. So you could even probably do a generative video with a little bit of technique and skill and savvy. And then you could win that search ranking and scoop up that advertising money. And the concern here is, since the people driving this are OpenAI, that's almost entirely funded by Microsoft, and Microsoft is building this into Bing, and Google is freaked out, so they're now competing with their own stuff, and Facebook's been rolling something out. So the concern is, if the biggest tech companies that have been dominating search are now trying to dominate with AI, are they really going to sort of be regulators' last resort to shut things down if it's producing waves of misinformation or just waves of junk news that are the only things that can make money? Will they step in and stop that if they're trying to win this current war for the future of search and for online advertising? That's something that worries me right now, not because this is going to do a better job of news than existing news organizations. It clearly isn't. And if we look back at those tweets that Rob just generated, like, those are quick, but they're fine. They're not good. A professional can do better than that. And they can be useful as a starting point. You can generate a bunch of ideas and then you can clean them up, make them better. That can be a time saver for you as a professional. But the concern there is, when we get a wash in that, who is going to step in and pay attention to where the revenue streams are going? Because we could end up in a world in which the higher quality stuff, the real reporting, the real news gathering, just no longer has any revenue streams attached, unless we, as a society, or like either our actual regulators or the platforms that often function as sort of backup regulators, because the government doesn't govern as much as it could, Like, who is going to step in and make sure that we are actually able to fund real news?
Dave, could you tell the story of your that great academic article you wrote?
Yeah. So this is an experience I had a couple months ago. It was in March. I got an email from a student from a European university asking if I could provide him with a copy of an article that I had written. This happens a lot where, you know, people will run into a paywall and they'll email you. And usually what you do as an academic is you pull it up and you send a pre-publication version, which therefore doesn't fall afoul of copyright. So he sent me an email, and the problem, what made it interesting is he said it was an article published in 2010 in the Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Sciences, titled Tech Lobbying in the United States, Exploring Corporate Political Activity in the Information Age. And I have no memory of writing that article. But he's confident enough in this request that I write back saying, I'd be happy to help you out. I don't remember that article, and I'm not seeing it in my files. Can you give me a citation? He gives me a full citation, like exactly what you would expect to pull up. I'm like looking around. I spend probably half an hour or so searching around in my old files, like on other websites, on Google Scholar, trying to track it down. I'm seeing nothing. I figured maybe this is an edited volume book chapter I wrote, and I just don't remember the name we gave to it. And then eventually I actually look for because he gives me the issue and the page numbers of the journal Annals. And so I looked that up, and in that issue, there is no article with that title. In fact, there's 3 articles that span those page numbers, none of which are topically similar, none of which cite me. And at that point, I emailed the student saying, we've gone back and forth sort of 3 times. But at that point, I write back and I say, look, I'm looking at the table of contents for this, and the article doesn't seem to exist. Where did you find the reference? I'm happy to help, but the title's not ringing any bells. And at that point, the student just shut off all communication, just, went quiet. I did not hear again. And I am like 98% sure that what happened is the student tried to use ChatGPT for research, right? They asked for information, background information on tech lobbying in the 2010s, or in the 2000s. And ChatGPT, since it is a language generator, it has this hallucination problem, and it hallucinated up a reasonable title for such an article by an author who would have written such a thing in a journal that would have published such a thing. Like, I'm the type of person who would write that article. That journal is the type of journal that would have published it. And it just fabricates. And it left me with this worry, because I had wasted probably half an hour just, trying to be helpful to this student. And I don't really think the student did anything wrong. Like, what the student was doing was, instead of using ChatGPT in order to plagiarize, in order to write an essay for him, the student had clearly decided, all right, I'm going to use this to help me get up to speed on something. I'm going to use it the way you would use Wikipedia, right? Like, Wikipedia is a good place to start, a terrible place to finish. But I'm going to use ChatGPT to tell me about a topic that I'm trying to study. It's then going to give me enough background information that it'll also let me know who I should talk to and what articles I should read. And then I'm going to go read the real articles. I'll do my real research. I'll just use this in order to get myself going. The end result of that is the student, I'm sure, ended up being very embarrassed. I ended up a little annoyed, and just found myself thinking, this is probably the future we're heading into, is one in which the next time somebody writes to me saying, hey, can I have a copy of your article? If I don't recognize it, I probably just won't respond. Like, I'll just get a little bit ruder and coarser, because we're going to be awash in this, because we have these tools and we don't yet have a sense of what these tools are good for, right? Like, I had assumed going into that, prior to that conversation, I'd actually talked to a journalist, I think earlier that week, and the journalist was asking, what are the good ways to use ChatGPT? And I said, it's probably like Wikipedia. It's a good place to start, a bad place to end. We shouldn't be having ChatGPT write our news for us, but it could be useful in drafting. And now I kind of found myself stepping back and saying, okay, actually, it's not like Wikipedia, because Wikipedia does not hallucinate. And so we are going to spend, I think, the next few years fumbling around trying to figure out, this is a powerful set of very new tools. We need to figure out what they do well and what they do terribly. And all the hype surrounding them is tending to overemphasize the thing, expand upon the things that they can do well, while getting us to ignore the things that they're actually terrible for. Like the hallucination problem isn't going to go away, and it's a real problem, particularly for the news.
There is a newspaper now that is entirely artificial intelligence, or so it claims, called newsgpt.ai, or called newsgpt at newsgpt.ai. You can take a look. It's got a strange selection of news, and I was going to take you there, but I'm having enough technical problems that I didn't want to slow us down. CNET had the problem. In November, they began publishing pieces that were generated entirely by artificial intelligence tools. And by January, when Futurism in this or some other articles reported on it, CNET had published 70 articles under the byline CNET Money Staff. There were actually, if you click on that byline, it would explain to you that CNET Money Staff meant this article was assisted by an AI engine and reviewed, fact-checked, and edited by your editorial staff, but apparently not fact-checked very well, because of the 70 articles or so under that byline, 41 of them had errors. And they also found, as this headline indicates, that there were large pieces of plagiarism, of structural plagiarism, and sometimes verbatim plagiarism, but more tending to be structural plagiarism, because again, the bot is really just taking from the data that it is given, and the data that it is provided with can be all sorts of things, including I've read in some places sites including Reddit and Wikipedia and even 4chan. So that's reason by itself for some caution. So let's talk a little bit about the legal ramifications here. One is in copyright. So who owns the copyright when you create a work using artificial intelligence assistance? The Copyright Office has said that if there is non-human, substantial non-human assistance, it is not copyrightable material. Nobody owns that copyright. Well, that would mean it goes into the public domain. What substantial non-human assistance is? I use the word substantial. I don't know what the word they use is, but it's not yet determined. You know, those of us who deal in copyright have been wringing our hands for the last 25 years for the fact that copyright does not fit with today's technological world. And that continues and is magnified as it tries to apply to artificial intelligence. There's another issue, though, on the copyright side, which is there's publishers whose works are part of the database upon which ChatGPT draws. Shouldn't they be compensated for the works that they use and that they provide and that ChatGPT is using to train its bots? Getty Images is suing Stability AI right now for including images in the Stability AI database that were, quote, according to the complaint, unlawfully copied and processed millions of images protected by copyright. And what's more difficult is it's virtually impossible to track the source of these images and text that come out or get spit out by ChatGPT. Now, if you look at the terms of use of ChatGPT, they actually say in their terms of use, they require you, when you use ChatGPT, to identify the work as being produced through artificial intelligence means, which I thought was an interesting fact as well. What about libel? When I am libeled by a story that is generated by a bot, who do I sue? Do I sue ChatGPT? That's what an Australian mayor is doing when he was the subject of a story that said he served prison time for bribery, which was not true. So he has brought or is trying to bring a libel case against the bot developer that actually reported that information. There are varied ideas among scholars in this country about whether such a thing should be bringable. We think of libel as something that a human being has done to a human being. Maybe the human being who first distributed that article is the one who is to blame, but then how do you determine the degree of negligence? Or is it that non-human publication isn't really libel? It would be more something like product liability, a defect in the ChatGPT product that one seeks compensation for. Is it negligent if you write an article and you rely on AI for your information? I'd say probably yes, under most circumstances. Depends on what else you do to corroborate. But if you rely solely on AI, certainly at this stage in the game, I think that's negligent. Does it defeat actual malice though? Or can you say, I had a reasonable belief in the truth. I had reason to believe that was true. And so a public figure who has to prove that I published with knowing falsity, with knowledge that what I wrote was false, or substantial doubt as to its truth, can't prove that because I say I trusted ChatGPT. Or is that so reckless as to amount to actual malice? These are all questions we're going to figure out. And I can imagine that we may be talking about this Australian mayor's lawsuit in years to come, the way we talk about some of the early Covey v. CompuServe and Stratton Oakmont cases that were the early tests of platform liability in the internet libel context. And then there's a question, huge question of privacy. In terms of data collection, if you take a look at those terms of service, ChatGPT is getting your data. They're taking everything and they're using it. They are taking your prompts, they're taking your input, and they can use it. There's a good article about it. I put the link in there. And again, anybody who wants a copy of these slides can just email me and I will provide you a copy of the slides. So you do not want to be putting in any proprietary information into your prompts or into, the backup, the input that you provide with the prompt, because you don't know where that might go. You certainly don't want to be using the names of your confidential sources in that information, because there is not a guarantee of security there. I put up earlier the information about Essential AI, which is a very geeky site that talks a lot about AI issues and is great for advanced practitioners. They use something called the Reddit rule. If you would not put this on Reddit, do not put it into ChatGPT. Italy banned ChatGPT for a time because of its lax privacy rules, which have since been beefed up so that it is allowed. The other EU states are looking at regulation because Europe is far ahead of us in terms of protection of privacy. But it's a major issue. So that brings up the question of regulation. And a very wise man said, someone is going to lose when the lawyers and regulators step in, and it probably won't be Disney. Tell us what you mean, Professor Karpf.
Sure. And again, let me take a step back for a minute. The context, my knowledge of this subject area is based in some research I've been doing for the past 5 years on a project that I call the History of the Digital Future. The short version of which is there's a magazine called Wired Magazine, which has been around since 1993. I have read all of it. I read the whole thing chronologically in order to get a sense of the hype cycles surrounding technology, and what the digital future has looked like to us over the past now almost 30 years. And part of what that perspective brings out is previous moments that kind of look and feel like the moments that we're in now. And one moment that really stands out is the Napster moments. This is the very late 90s, early 2000s, when file share, thanks to the internet, file sharing was a major technological breakthrough. And suddenly, instead of the technologies through which you would share your songs with somebody, you know, when I was in high school, I had a tape deck with 2 tapes in it, which meant that you could double tape, right? And so you could make mixtapes for girls, and you could hand it to the girl, and hopefully she would like you back. This was me when I was 16. I'm going to assume that everyone's laughing at that joke because that was definitely supposed to be funny, and I know we're all tied in here. But so that was the technology of sharing before, right? You could burn a CD for somebody, or you could double tape something. You could make people mixtapes. And the recording industry was fine with that. That, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You have purchased a CD or a tape, you can do with it what you would like within reasonable boundaries. And then we get this file sharing technology, which means you can take the CD that you had bought and you can upload those songs to your computer, and other people can search the files on your computer and take a song off of it. And suddenly entire college campuses have all of the music that anyone on college campus who has a CD, everyone has that CD. And that for a while looked like a cataclysm for the music industry, the likes of which they just wouldn't be able to recover from, until the Recording Industry of America said, no, that violates what we view as our copyright. We are going to set our lawyers to work on this. We are going to sue a bunch of kids who didn't think they did anything wrong for 6 figures. And through that, we are going to create a lot of friction for this seemingly inevitable future. They did. They were villainized for it, but they created a lot of friction. And in the midst of that friction, Steve Jobs walked in with the recording industry heads and said, you know what you're going to do instead is I have this thing called the iPod. We're going to have a thing called iTunes. We're going to charge $1 per song. And the safety and ease and comfort of that means that most people are then going to start paying for their music again, even though it's digital music and even though it's still possible to pirate. That's the history that emerged. So what seemed like an inevitable history, in retrospect, was not so inevitable, because eventually the content industry was going to have something to say. Now that I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to speculate on the merits of the Getty case. But what I will say as a social scientist and informed observer is Getty has fewer lawyers than Disney does. We are already in a spot with not ChatGPT, but DALL-E 2, which is the image generator that OpenAI produced ChatGPT, and also DALL-E 2. The image generator has been around for a little over a year now. We already have people using these image generators to produce images of Mickey Mouse with a machine gun. You can do that. If you fiddle around for a little bit and find the right prompt, you can take essentially Disney's copyrighted works, it's intellectual property, and you can make that intellectual property do things that Disney is not going to want it to do. That is bad for Disney's interests. So my prediction to you all is that in the next few years, Disney is going to figure out the soft spot that most harms its business model and that it most wants its lawyers to make a strong case against. And nothing against whoever's representing Getty, but I'm guessing that Disney's lawyers are a little more gold-plated, or at least there are a larger army of them than there are of the Getty lawyers. And so I imagine once the content industry steps in, that's where we're going to get some new frictions that then reshape these technologies. Related to that, I just want to point out to you all that, well, right now this stuff is somewhere between free and cheap, right? You can do this for free, or if you want GPT-4, you can pay $20 a month. And that signals to a lot of newsrooms, particularly the higher ups, who worry about the finances. Like if you look at CNET, the reason why CNET has AI doing this, and I'm forgetting their name, BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed just shut down their newsroom last week. BuzzFeed is also using AI for a bunch of its quizzes and games. They're not doing that because they think AI is better. They're doing that because they think AI is cheaper. And right now it is cheaper. But something that I want to point out to all of you is that this regulatory uncertainty is a hidden cost, right? Like I would encourage any of you who are making these decisions to move very slowly, because while it looks like a cost saving to fire a bunch of your low-level staff and just have ChatGPT do it, you are creating a downside risk that you might get sued because we don't know how this stuff works and it's going to be worked out in the courts. So I don't think you want to be the ones making that mistake, and that's an argument for moving slowly here.
Basically, every agency in the federal government is starting to wake up and say antitrust issues, environmental issues, discrimination issues, privacy issues, and the Biden administration has woken up and is saying we got to do something about this. Whether they know what to do about it or can reach a consensus about what to do about it is very much a different question. Let me now take you back. And talk about some of the ethical rules and guidelines that have been developing. And they begin with, certain basic fundamental concerns. One is a sense that ChatGPT is not ready for audience-facing content, and that redundant human oversight is necessary. Cade Metz of the New York Times, chatbots cannot deal with concepts they've never seen before. They can't take ideas and explore them in the physical world. The onus is on you to be wary of what these systems say and do, to edit what they give you, and to approach everything you see online with skepticism. Jenna Barella Pointer, ChatGPT is proof that finding truth is a lot trickier than having enough data and the right algorithm. Don't anthropomorphize them. Ask hard questions about what these tools are purported to do. AI is very good at delivering predictable work. This gives us the opportunity to reject their suggestion and turn in the other direction to more creative, novel, and less predictable areas. Here's another valuable resource that I actually got those quotes from Tekla Zemansky's Content to Design. You are responsible, by the way, for spotting AI in the submissions that you get from your freelancers. And it's going to be increasingly difficult to spot that. There are tools for trying to detect AI content. One of them, I put the URL up there. Somebody at Google Brain says a typo in the text is actually a really good indicator that it was written by a human. Well, somebody's going to catch on to that pretty soon. There's a good article on MIT Tech Review dealing with this as well that you might want to take a look at. Some sample ethics policies, one put together by the Center for Cooperative Media, which put together the book that I think is the best one you could have, and one that's worth the price of admission to this program. AI Exchange has a prompt for generating an ethics policy using ChatGPT itself. And then there's a question of Wired, which has basically learned from the CNET experience and put together what I think Dave has called pretty much the best such guidelines that he has seen. And those guidelines say in brief, no to text generation based on AI or image generation or video. Not even stock images can be AI images. No to using AI to edit text, but you can use AI for brainstorming, for suggesting headlines, for suggesting social media posts subject to editor approval. And I think what they're saying there is that they might allow AI to come up with the original social media posts and subject to editor approval, although it's not clear to me. Yes for generating stories and ideas. Yes for research and analysis. And you can find those guidelines right here at the Wired site. And I think we're pretty much out of time. I hope that you found this helpful and informative. If you have questions, I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to them, but feel free to email me, and I'm sure Dave feels the same way. The motto to leave you with, I think, is that rigorous and redundant human oversight is key. And those maybe are the words you should go away with, along with any that, Dave, you'd like to add as parting thoughts.
Only parting thought, again, I've been writing about this a bit on my Substack. I think a lot of the AI concerns that we've heard, particularly in that sign-on letter that calls for pause in new generative models, has started from the premise that this stuff is going to work as advertised and is just going to get better and better and better. And that might happen, but what I see in the recent history of technology is often the bigger problems that crop up are from things working less well than or not as advertised. And that's sort of a second failure mode, that the failure mode that comes up through hallucinations, through trying to use tools like ChatGPT in ways that we assume it will be able to work out, but actually it's just not ready for it because the data in fact isn't all that good, or because it's an inappropriate use. That's where a lot of the bigger, more threatening failures come up. And that, I think, is the set of concerns that we should be walking away with, is not apocalyptic, oh God, this is the future of all creative, this is the end of all creative industries. I don't think we need to worry too much about that yet. I think we need to worry about how we're going to fund journalism, fund graphic design, like how are we going to pay for things? We should worry about that. Worry about the business models. That has been an important historical lesson in the last 30 years. But then I think also we should be moving slowly, because we need to get a clear sense of what is this robustly good for and what's it not so good for. I think it's very likely, when all is said and done, that these tools, if everybody remembers Microsoft Clippy from the late 90s, that was that virtual assistant that would pop up and say, it looks like you're writing a letter, and then would give you a letter format, and everybody would get, like, nobody liked it. And nobody liked it because it just wasn't very good yet. I think it's very likely that these tools are going to give us a revolutionarily better Clippy. And I look forward to that. I think that would be great if you have a virtual assistant that has a clear sense of what are all these, like the cliches of all the narrative forms you're trying for, and gives you tips on how to make things look the way people expect them to look. And that's a future that doesn't harm any of our jobs. It also doesn't justify all the spending they've done to develop these models. But I think we should use it for Clippy style things. I think it'd be quite good for that, and I see very few harms. And we should be cautious in assuming that this resets everything and is a revolution on the level of fire, the way it's often being described. Because if recent history tells me anything, it's that people always say that, and the reality is always a little bit more messy and disappointing than we think.
The subhead of one of Dave's recent articles is, the generative AI age is going to be exhausting and unpleasant, isn't it?
It is.
Thank you, Dave, very much for joining me in this program and adding wisdom to it.
Okay.
And thank all of you for joining us. I hope you found the webinar interesting and informative.
Thanks so much to all of you. This is going to be interesting to watch.